All right, so I've got a brand new deck for you. I'm going to do a little bit of deck tech, and then I'll run you through some games. As you'll see, basically these games against Keep Flying, I'm tuning the deck, and then you'll see like a loss, a couple wins, a loss, a couple wins, well, 3 wins, a loss, 2 wins, 2 losses, a win, a win, a win. So the win rate's pretty good, but what's been happening is that this, starting with Keep Flying here, who is actually promoted on the channel, and you should check out his content for more Commander stuff. Anyway, he helped me out a lot, and the process of losing to him, I was able to tune my deck with a suggestion that he made that was tremendously important for making this deck functional. So without further ado, let me reveal the deck, and then I'll go through some of these games, and you'll see the deck as it's getting more and more tuned. And then these last, I think it's 2 or 3 games here where I have the wins, are actually the tuned version. You'll see that it plays out so much better. So without further ado, here is the deck, something that you might not have expected from me, given that you know I enjoy control. But believe it or not, this is a control deck, but it's also an aggro deck. It uses aggression to control how your opponent can win. It puts them in a bind in which they can't execute their game plan, and you effectively disrupting Scepter or Mind Twist your opponent for their entire hand because they die at the end of the game with it in their hand. It's a very similar to how Winter Orb prevents them from executing their game plan, except instead of Orb doing it, you do it by reducing their life total to 0. In the same way that Sly wins and other decks wins. But on top of that, this deck produces a lot of card advantage, a lot. So first of all, the tech that Keep Flying suggested for me, which was super important, was these 4 Ash Barons. These 4 Ash Barons, not only do they smooth out the early game, they also power up circular logic, and occasionally, which is occasionally important because your opponent's math will be off on how much you can logic for, and they make the sideboard so much better. I was going to sideboard Ray and Grudge anyway without the Ash Barons and without the red and white land here. I was going to sideboard them because just with the flashback and the ability to discard them to Careful Study and stuff, you can get card advantage with them, and they're very good. But with the Mountain and the Plains, the 1 Traveler's Amulet, and the 4 Ash Barons, you have a very high frequency of getting to play these cards twice, and that makes them just amazing sideboard cards. Because as good as it is to, say, loot away an Ancient Grudge and then flash it back, and that's good because that's killing something for free, you know, it's destroy target artifact, draw a card, basically. You'd rather double cast the Grudge simply because if you've sideboarded it in, then the effect is generally going to be as good or better than almost anything else you can draw. So doubling it up means you're doubling up your best effect, which is why you sideboard it in. If it's not your best effect after sideboarding, then it's questionable whether or not, well, I take that back. Merfolk Looter is your best card, period, bar none. But having said that, these should be probably your second best after game 1. So anyway, super awesome. The Ash Barons were great. They smoothed out the mana so much better. They have synergy with the Simic Growth Chambers if you have to play them early. They're just fantastic cards that totally belong in this deck and make this deck work. So Rays are in there for decks like this, decks that are running like big enchantments, lots of enchantments. There are also enchantments you'll see out of like occasionally mono red, mono black. There are some enchantments that are out there that you might have to be concerned with. Mostly though, it's in there for the Boggles deck, and against the Boggles deck you really don't want to just be flashing it back. You want to be hard casting Ray after Ray, because Boggles creatures you can't block, generally speaking, and often, not always, but often you cannot even target them, which means that Just the Wind will not 2-for-1 them on their enchantments. So it can be tough match round 1, although you can race them actually sometimes and just beat them if they don't get, if you can prevent them from getting, or they do not draw the enchantment that gives their creature the green-white enchantment that gives their creature +2/+2 and lifelink. So if that's not hitting you, then generally you can race them, and so that's the #1 target for Ray of Revelation. And you can stop it, of course, with Circular Logic and occasionally Just the Wind. But after sideboarding, it gets much better for Rays. with the raise. Grudge is there for a number of different decks, but primarily for affinity and affinity-like versions. There's an ATOG combo deck out there that's gross, in which case you need both Grudge and Hydroblast, and then there's just affinity, which case you just need Grudge. And if you're playing against affinity, what you tend to do is you grudge all their artifact mana. You want to just kill their artifact lands and leave them with. They will have things like they will have other artifact producing mana produced from artifacts, but you can make it really hard for them. However, occasionally you'll need to grudge 4/4s, so that not too often, because generally speaking, like you can trump their Mirror Enforcers, but you know, use your best judgment, of course. Against the ATOG deck, Hydroblast is there to either keep ATOG off the table or kill it when it gets there if you can, but you have to be very careful because of Fling, and the other card that you can use Hydroblast will help you a lot with is Temur Battle Rage. So there's a number of Temur Battle Rage decks out there. It's not just ATOG. There's combo decks that use it, a lot of decks that use it, and Temur Battle Rage you can stop with Hydroblast. And also, of course, just the mono red decks are really good. Against them, you frequently will just pull out Deep Analysis and bring in the Hydroblast, because Deep Analysis flashed back is too much life to lose against a deck like that, and flashed forward, played forward, it's often just a little bit too expensive. But you may, depending on if they're just almost creatureless, you could cut the Just the Winds and then hope to have an opportunity to cast Deep Analysis where there's a relative board stall. So against them, I would actually consider cutting like 4 Just the Winds. I would cut, frequently I'd cut actually Just the Winds and Deep Analysis, and sneak in something like, maybe leave some number, maybe 0, most likely 0, sneak in Traveler's Amulet Plains and 2 Ray of Revelations, because they don't have a ton, but they have some enchantments that will deal continuous damage to you. So it sideboard something like these 8 cards here against the mono red deck that's just burn. Take out the Just the Winds and the Deeps. So anyway, I'm going to run through some games. There are some sequencing plays. There's a lot of sequencing in this deck that's really, like, the more you play it, the more you realize how wonderful it is, the way that the deck will play out, the way your mana curves out. All I can really tell you is that, like I said, Merfolk Looter is the best card in the deck, because Merfolk Looter is very, very close, almost exactly like a Library of Alexandria that doesn't care how many cards are in your hand, and occasionally it also functions like a Soul Ring, like when you use it for Arrogant Worm or Circular Logic. So it's just an insane card, and so if you can, like, it's quite right to protect the card most cases, and you can do that. Keep in mind, Just the Wind, which is an unsummon, you can unsummon your own stuff. So if you're playing against removal heavy decks, you can use Just the Wind as a pseudo counter spell on removal that costs you a little tempo but might well be worth it. And you can also if you're playing against well, Just the Wind is also a hedge against, there's a Nomad deck that can, and other decks that can make their creatures have shadow and then do lethal damage, and Just the Wind gives you a way to interact with that doesn't just rely on Circular Logic, so it can protect you from losing. It's also possible, you know, you can lose to an early, if the opponent has an early Delver of Secrets draw that's very disruptive, but it's difficult to lose to that, because you can race them just as well most times thanks to rankers and, to a limited extent, Elephant Guides. Alright, so having said all that, I'm going to run through some games. I don't have, I will mention this too, I actually PTQ'd with this deck back in the day, but in the old days we actually had uncommons. We had some very important cards that I don't have here. The cards that I had from the old days that I don't have here are, I had, in place of Just the Winds, I had main deck Waterfront Bouncer, which I can run here, but Just the Wind is probably better, just because of the Summoning Sickness. So I had Waterfront Bouncer. It's possible, however, I suppose Bouncer could make a sideboard, or you could play like 1 or 2 in the main, but I think for now I'm not gonna mess around with the way that the build is. I think 4 and some is probably plenty. Anyway, so the old days I had a Waterfront Bouncer and Gilded Drake combo, but there's no Gilded Drake available, so that's the other reason why I don't have either one. And then the other thing that I had in the old days were the 2 really important uncommons that have never been reprinted in common, as far as I can tell, Wonder and Roar of the Worm, which is 2 really important cards, but unfortunately with those gone, what we're doing is we're kind of simulating Wonder via Rancor, making our creatures damage unchumpable, which is kind of what Wonder does, only it does it better. And then of course Elephant Guide on Arrogant Worm can also kind of simulate that, just because it's a gigantic trampler that does a ton of damage. And then thankfully Arrogant Worm does seem to have been reprinted. Now I don't know if it's just online or not. Brian was saying to me that he thinks it's just online, which is a real bummer, so I don't know if you'd be able to play this offline, but I can tell you I've played it in leagues and it's legal. So I in fact invested in this deck because it was legal. If it weren't, like, I would want my money back. Like, I'd be super upset if it were unplayable, because I used the interface to tell me what was legal and then got the cards. And putting this whole thing together wasn't exactly like, this is pretty much like, I have my commander deck for multiplayer, and I have this deck, and I have some cards that I will eventually use for either Type 1 or Legacy, but way short on cards there, and that's it. I don't hardly have any tickets anymore. Most of the tickets that I had were gone. What I do have is, I have like 2, but I have 1,000 play points because I was doing pretty well picking some play points up. And so in the future you should see some tournament games, but for now we'll just run through practice games. And as I said, I'm going to start with the post keep flying games, because this was the worst part of the build. And in fact, I'm not sure exactly. I'm looking at the clock to try to figure out, okay, so 4 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So I'm going to start with this 9 p.m. because at that point the deck starts getting a lot closer to what it actually was. The beginning part of the day I finished, I took the lessons and I thought about it for a while, I made changes, and I started here now. You'll see some cards that are weird or don't fit, and I'll kind of mention what I was thinking when I put those in, but the main thing you'll notice is that the Rankers and Elephant Guides were not there. So early on I was trying to play a more control oriented version of the deck, and I realized that control doesn't have to mean counters. There's ways you can control the board without counters, like and one of the ways to do that is just high pressure, and also the unsummons functioned, as I said earlier, as virtual counters. So let's run through these games. I'll go through starting with the 9 p.m. games, and we'll see what happened and what I was playing with here. Hopefully, okay, yeah, so this version had 4 Piracy Charms and 4 Temporal Springs instead of Rancor and Elephant Guide. And I kept a very sketchy hand, but there's going to be a while before I have to mulligan, because I can Piracy Charm to make my opponent discard, which I do here in response to Augur before he has choices, taking a Preordain. So effectively it was a mental misstep. Okay, there we go. So I get a Looter down. Now, the chances are this Looter's dead, but if it does live, then maybe, well, he got a Doomblade. So if he chooses not to Doomblade it for some reason, he's going to super regret it, or, well, otherwise kill it. He doesn't. He has a Disfigure, so it's down. Alright, so now though I get to Temporal Spring my opponent's Dimer Aqueduct, which is exactly what the Temporal Springs were in there for other bounce lands. Opponent misses on his second Augur, but I just cannot find a enabler here, and these Piracy Charms are feeling really bad right now. I could, if I had a land, I could Piracy Charm myself and play Arrogant Worm if I had 1 more land, and then block during combat, but I decide I'm just going to trade it off, and I get a Doomblade for it, which is pretty nice. Alright, we're going to spring my opponent back in time a little bit further. See if he replays his pickup land or what. I doubt it. Well, he does. Okay, so, well, I don't draw a land, but I do get deep. Hopefully I can find a land there. No. Huh. Spring again is crazy. I think that I lost this game, honestly, because I just have nothing going on. But, I go for spring. My opponent does have a counter here. out of all that. Even though I have denied him multiple turns, he actually had a counter the whole time. I guess he was probably fairly frustrated by the situation. Here you get to see the power of careful study in action, where I get to play multiple creatures. And pass for the turn. But if my opponent has removal for Arrogant Worm, so he can do that, and I don't have a Madness, I do have a Madness card to discard to that, so I go ahead and bounce this guy just because at this point I'm hoping he misses, and he does actually, so it worked out, saved me a little bit of damage. I'm going to drop to 2, pretty much just praying to stick what I need to stick so that I can try to live. Opponent's got, I do have the Call of the Wind here. This is some tricks I can do here. Opponent has a Doomblade, but it's target non-black creature, which is awesome, so we'll just make it black. I'm trying to stabilize. You see, this version's just really not as good as it should be. Alright, so I'm going to block, and then here's a little trick here. I actually adjust the wind, picking up my own Root Walla. Try to. Because then I can replay it, I can pitch it to the Merfolk Looter. Opponent had a counter for that, but now he's down to only 2 cards in hand, so I've actually ground down a lot of my opponent's cards. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat out an Arrogant Worm while I don't have to worry about a counterspell, hopefully. Piracy Charm taking him down to just 1 card in hand. Maybe I've got to a point in the game where I'm stable. Well, we'll see. And you can see how Merfolk Looters tap to draw a card basically in this deck. He gets a Gurmag Angler down. I'm kind of missing those Just the Winds now and Temporal Springs. And a second Angler. Those are his 2 cards in his hand. So this is not good. Not good at all. I do main phase Arrogant Worm only because, again, I don't want to have it get countered, but also because I want to pick up a land. The Simic Growth Chambers allow you to so I'm going to pick up Ash Barrens, thin my deck with the Ash Barrens, and then use the lands that I fetch to do something with the Wild Mongrel. So unfortunately, because I'm at 2, I can't double block the Angler. I'm pretty much in desperation mode. I turned the Mongrel black. Oh, I failed to cycle the Ash Barrens for some reason. I have no idea why. I should have thinned the deck. I don't want to draw another land. Opponent has recoil, and it's pretty much all over at this point, and I think I just scoop. So a manful attempt to recover from an absolutely horrible position. This is also, by the way, drawing the logic there reveals why typically you might not want to looter main phase, but as you could see, this game was a game of desperation the whole time. So let's play game 2, and it's just, the problem is just that the cards, first of all, I missed a land drop, and secondly, the cards just don't have the right level of impact. They did cool stuff in that game, but they're just not good. This is actually a game in the leagues. So here's a nice little tempo play. You get to play Ash Barrens, float it, and then cycle it off by picking up using Simic Growth Chamber. It pays for itself to cycle, which is a really decent way to take advantage of the card. I have a looter here, but I play Mongrel because I'm worried about removal. I want to be able to either opponent augurs and misses. You got to dispel the first time, but misses the second time. I wanted to be able to logic also and protect my looter. My opponent has no play here, so I'm going to be able to feed it a deep analysis if I need to in order to pump up the circular logic. But as you can see, well, my opponent takes Temporal Spring here, but as you can see, if I untap with this looter, yeah, it's pretty much game over, right? So I'll play a free Basking Root Walla right now. Only doing this because I think I was intending to actually hardcast Deep Analysis here. First I'm going to swing in because my 2 damage is more important than his, and then I decide that that would be kind of foolish, and I'm not going to do that. My opponent duresses a counter out of my hand, so be it. Now if I'd have waited, I could have drawn and discarded. I think what I'm trying to do here is hit land drops. I don't think this is the right play in hindsight. I actually think this was somewhat foolish play. But as you can see, Careful Study converts a Deep Analysis and Root Wall into cards, finding Ash Barrens, which turns into an island, which empowers the circular logic that's in my hand. Opponent goes for a Gurmag. I know he has the dispel, so I'm going to hold my counter and just bounce the Gurmag later and dispel it, or trade away the use the Wild Mongrel to fight with the Gurmag. Opponent has a counterspell from Mongrel. It's fine to let that happen. Finally, I'm getting smarter and not using my looter. I have 7 cards in hand, though. As you can see, Wild Mongrel is extraordinarily difficult to deal with. So I think about it and I decide I'm going to wait one turn because a pumped up Root Wallow will save me a lot of cards. And instead I just loot away a Careful Study. It's done its job for the most part. Here my opponent tries to recoil. I'm going to go ahead and Circular Logic and get that Dispel out of his hand. But it doesn't matter too much to me. It's just I want the Dispel gone, and I figured he would take the exchange there. I get a discard Deep Analysis, and that frees me up to Temporal Spring his creature. Merfolk Looter ready to go here. Hopefully finding a 0-drop, but even if I don't. So this is a little suspicious attack from my opponent. I figured it means he's going to do 2 damage to all creatures, but either way, I'll take it. Block, and oh, instead he's got bounce and he wants to keep hitting my lands, which is interesting. Just not as good against me as you'd think. So I'm going to go ahead and loot, throwing away a Mongrel, and play a land and pass. I'll play the Simic Growth Chamber again. Alright, opponent decides not to delve, or send in the Angler, which is pretty wise. Honestly, like when I look at cards like Gurmag Angler, I think like if Arrogant Worm is only online and not offline, it kind of seems silly to me because frankly, when you look at Gurmag Angler, the power level of Arrogant Worm and Gurmag, 1 mana for a 5/5 versus 3 mana for a Arrogant Worm that needs a card to be 3 mana, I would say it's pretty fine the way that it is. Anyway, my opponent goes for a Doomblade, so I'm going to respond, attempt to play Just the Wind, and bounce my own Arrogant Worm. So he's trying to Doomblade the Arrogant Worm and get card advantage, but what I'm going to do is, as you can see, the Just the Winds act as counterspells here. So I draw a card, discard Just the Wind, so I get a free card, pick up the Arrogant Worm, leaving just the Mongrel in play. His Doomblade fails. Then the Mongrel, I throw away cards I don't care about, Ash Barrens and a couple forests, plus a Root Wallow to pump him up, make him a 6/6, kill the Gurmag Angler, leaving him with just Circular Logic and Arrogant Worm, but I have a Looter in play. So on my next turn, I draw a card, my 3rd card. Looter will draw a 4th card, and I just keep pressuring the opponent. It just, you cannot leave a Looter in play. Like it never ends, right? Alright, so that was, I think that was game 3. For some reason it played out of order, or maybe I misclicked. But we'll run through the other one. So this is, no, I guess this is game 3. So unfortunately for my opponent, that took a lot of time, so I'm not sure if my opponent's going to time out here, but I have the nuts again, Careful Study into Basking Root Wallow, Deep Analysis, sort of like where you want to be on turn 1, totally crazy, just 1 blue, draw 2 cards. Okay, now my opponent can't block. Oh yeah, I had Werebears in the sideboard for long games. I don't think it makes any sense though, because what I found is consistently opponents who are prepared for long games bring in Graveyard Hate, and the Werebears walk right into that. So it's something that I've since removed. Alright, I've got a turn 2 Looter. It's active. My opponent did not kill it, so this game's probably over. Opponent tries to kill it. In response, I'm going to Arrogant Worm. I don't have a counter spell or a bounce spell, so I'll just take Arrogant Worm, draw a card. And now we can apply some serious pressure. I'll go ahead and Ash Barrens into an island, which of course sets me up for Werebear, and my opponent inexplicably blocks here, so okay, let's see what you got. Nothing. I guess you just want to steal a little tempo from me. I guess that's okay, but not great. He gets an Angler. Obviously against the deck with a million bounce and recursion spells, that's not going to get him there. It's down to 10. Opponent's trying to build up enough cards in his graveyard so we can get that Angler down. Opponent's down to 5 in a moment. Careful Studying away a Deep Analysis in a forest. And I now have Threshold. And in this format, there's no Damnation, so I just play 2 4/4s. Go ahead and play your Angler and whatever. Recoil is Just the Wind, which I just throw away because I don't need it. I've got Temporal Springs and dead. So that was pretty alright. I like the Temporal Springs a lot, by the way. I'm just not sure. I think that the Elephant Guides are probably better, and you'll see why at the end. If you can catch your opponent with a Temporal Spring it's good. But if you can catch an Elephant Guide, it's great, and I'll take great over good. So my opponent has Delver of Secrets. This is what, incidentally, the Piracy Charms were initially designed to stop, but of course they've become Rancor, and instead of stopping Delver, the goal is going to be to try to just outrace it. Alright, so I play an Ash Barrens there, hoping I can find something useful, and I do. Let's loot into a free Root Walla. Call him Loot Walla. And then I'm going to play a second looter, because, I mean, my opponent may clear my board here, but if he doesn't, then the looters will take over. He doesn't have Electrickery, so now we're in great shape. And we're going to start taking over this game, I think. Arrogant Worm comes down. I'm going to loot right now because I'm trying to hit land drops, throwing away a Deep Analysis. Opponent does not flip Delver, which is bad news for him. Plays a Nivix Cyclops. So the deck that I'm facing is a deck that has the combo potential to just immediately kill you out of nowhere. And so I'm trying to keep that in mind, but he's low on cards, and I think that I'll probably be alright. So I'm playing it a little safe. Flips a Insectile Aberration with Tamir Battle Rage, and then I realized that I was not playing it safe enough. Tamir Battle Rage with Gush. Oh crap. Well, I'm going to take 3 damage, but I'm not dead. It wasn't lethal, and with that I vow to probably never tap out again. Play another free Root Walla. You can see what I mean about the Merfolk looters being Library of Alexandria's. I'm going to go ahead and Temporal Spring one of his guys. I need to actually pressure my opponent, but I'm not quite ready. I'm close. Plays another I bounced his Delver for time. He goes for Kiln Fiend. I'm going to go ahead and logic the Fiend, thinking that I'm probably safe here doing this. So Counterspell, draw a card for 1 blue. Seems good. Alright, so I've got Piracy Charm for that. Gonna start applying some pressure, not a ton. Unfortunately, the Cyclops do a good job here of holding off the Basking Root Wallas. Looting into another Root Walla here for free. And I'm going to loot into throwing away a Just a Win and hope that I'm going to be fine, because I think I can put enough pressure on my opponent here to make good things happen. So I'm going to go ahead and Temporal Spring Nivix his Cyclops, and my opponent scoops. And the reason he scoops is, if you actually add it up, it's 4. So assuming he can't block the Arrogant Worm, he's got to chump the Mongrel, and if he does, I get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 damage. It's a ton, and it's a lot of pressure. And even if I don't go all like totally ham, by the way, it's 12, 13, 14 damage. If he didn't block the Mongrel, it's actually 16. It would be lethal. But assuming I don't go ham here, my opponent's just lost so much tempo that he realizes it's probably over. I think he may have scooped prematurely there, and honestly, like, as I'm watching these other games, I'm thinking, man, the better version of the deck is just so much better than this. But this was a tournament, and I did okay in it, and look at that top deck. Kill your Delver. That is something I do miss. So you can see my opponent's brought in Relic of Progenitus, some Graveyard Hate. Hopefully, though, Merfolk Looter lives. I don't see a mountain over there. He's looking for one, I think. He finds a Delver. That's not going to do it, sir. I'm going to get a Mongrel down, pick up my land and pass. Opponent does or does not flip Delver. He has a terrible draw. I'm not sure why he kept it. I guess on the strength of turn 1 Delver. Alright, looting away a Deep Analysis. Land, I can either careful study that worm into play, or I can loot it. I think it's safe enough to just wait and loot, because I can also Circular Logic. Okay, so my opponent flips a Delver and he uses a Pyroblast to do it. So, alright, we're going to go for an end turn Arrogant Worm. Opponent probably has a response. And he does not. In response, he concedes. So if he had a Counterspell, then I would have gone ahead and lost the free card, but pitched Circular Logic to Wild Mongrel, countered his counter, and then that way I could, my clock is faster than his. I take 6. In fact, on the next attack, so I could draw 2. So I would draw a card. So I'd have 3, 4, 5, 6. Draw 2 with Deep Analysis, 7, 8. I get to dump all 8 to Wild Mongrel. That's 10. Plus Arrogant Worm is 14. Plus Looter is 15. So it's very deceptive, but this is actually a crap ton of damage, which was part of the reason why I brought in the extra threats as well, because I realized that the deck can do so much damage that being able to just up that can shave an entire turn off, even though it's only as simple as like a Rancor. Like right there, a Rancor plus. If one of the two cards I drew had been a Rancor, if they were in the deck, then I would have got it. All right, so here we are playing in the next one. This is again tournament. Unfortunately, this guy knocks me out of the finals, as we'll see. But I give him a good fight. I get a looter. I'm not sure exactly what I'm playing. It looks like Affinity. Now I know what it is. It's ATOG combo, but the problem is I'm not that familiar with what to expect, like how lethal that deck can get. I figure, okay, well, the thing to do against ATOG is going to be to just grind. I want to do card exchanges with him and grind out value that way. So I go for a Arrogant Worm here off a looter, which is fantastic. My opponent has, I'm thinking, what the heck does he have? Metallic Rebuke? Oh, that's kind of like, I got card advantage, but I need tempo. Alright, so we'll get the dog out, and hopefully that'll do it. Who let the dogs out? Alright, so opponent's jamming more cards into play. I am going to try to grind some cards out of his hand. Wild Mongrel, he eats a Chromatic Star. Well, some artifacts out of play, but the problem is he's got these Chromatic Stars that actually return cards to his hand after he sacrifices them, so it's a bit of a problem. Alright, so I'm going to pump up Mongrel a few times. I'm going to go ahead and loot, and then bounce his guy, attempt to bounce his guy after he's sacked a few things, and so Mongrel will live. So I used cards that, you know, Basking Rootwalla and Careful Study, which I didn't really care about study once I have looter going, to try to make that exchange as positive for me as I can. But at the end of the whole thing, I really didn't accomplish that much because, again, Chromatic Stars and stuff. Temporal Spring looking super weak here, like way worse than Elephant Guide would have been. Like an Elephant Guide right there might have been enough to really position me in good shape. Now, not so much. Alright, so I was hoping just to slow him down here. Again, I'm trying to make it as painful as possible because I know he can go lethal, and I just don't want to risk it. I go for a pump here, and I think I die in response. Yeah, I think I'm dead. So my opponent was playing well. He waited for me to tap out. I can't logic now because I tried to pump my Rootwalla, and I am absolutely toast. Be it Temur, Battle Rage, or Fling. I'm not sure which one it's going to be. Oh, Fling. I take 19, and I'm dead. Super, super stupid, and I have no Hydroblasts at this time. So I cannot sideboard Hydroblast against this stupid deck to deal with it. This deck's just not set up very well at all. I did have the Ancient Grudge tech, as you can see, but well, we'll see how it does. Alright, so I would love to find a mountain so I can double tap this Ancient Grudge. I do not, so I'll discard Ancient Grudge and Rootwalla, which I play for free, and kill one of his artifact lands. I top deck Grudge here, so I'm going to play a looter and wait one turn. I can pump up the Rootwalla, so that should keep his Frogmite and his Flare off my back for a little while. He has to pass, and now I can start doing Merfolk looter shenanigans. Go ahead and draw some extra cards here. Build up my mana. I make a oops. Pick up my land, which is allowing me to block, but on the positive side, I had enough cards to be able to discard. Opponent slams double Mirror Enforcer, which is pretty scary. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and kill one of them and take some damage here. And he's digging and finds himself an ATOG. This is not looking good at all. Alright, well, Mongrel's good. Probably should have played that, just cast it a little differently maybe, but we'll see. Alright, so I'm going to block there, pump Mongrel with Deep Analysis, Forest. This is, of course, a trap. And my opponent does nothing, so I'll go ahead and make the exchange, looting out a Just the Wind on the ATOG because he doesn't have, at the end of his turn, because he doesn't actually have the red to replay it, unless he sacks Chromatic Star. And then I also have Circular Logic. So he goes for Thoughtcast. I'm trying to kind of mana screw my opponent here, so I decide I'm going to Thoughtcast instead of doing the play of countering the ATOG if he wants to sack the star. The goal here is to keep as many artifacts off the board as possible. And alright, so Looter wants to basically tap every... You can see how incredibly valuable that card is and how much you want to be using it all the time, basically. All right, so we're going to get Arrogant Worm out, who is going to block the ATOG and try to talk my opponent into sacking some stuff. Well, I thought it was, but my opponent Galvanic Blasts. So I'm just going to let everything through, and my opponent sacks a few things, and I bounce ATOG and pass. And the reason I didn't do more, the reason I didn't sacrifice or block with the Frogmite with the Root Wall is that I wanted to leave 3 mana up for Circular Logic in case my opponent had a counter for my bounce. So he replays ATOG there. Unfortunately, because he got the Springleaf Drum, I can't stop the ATOG like I was originally planning. But what I can do is dig, and I find some pressure. Alright, so I'm just really trying to grind this opponent out. I finally get a chance to go get a mountain in case and I draw some extra cards, so in case I find myself a opponent's got enough burn to actually finish me off here, I'm having to defend myself. So in case I find myself in Ancient Grudge, I'll be able to double cast it. He opts not to send his ATOG in, so I'm going to send in just my Arrogant Worm here, play another Werebear and Looter and pass. Loot at the end of the turn, get another creature into play. You can see how like indomitable, like you just can't stop a Looter if it gets going. I'm digging now. I'm trying to get more safety. I wanted to know how many creatures I could attack with, and so we're going to get an army down. And at this point, my opponent gives up. I mean, he could be sacking his artifacts, but that's not exactly going to get him. That's not exactly Value Town, right? And here, even if I loot at the end of my opponent's turn, he has a Galvanic Blast in response to whatever, I can just hardcast Circular Logic, and I can throw away the island and convert it into a real card, which is the other thing that's really nice about the pickup lands, is that with Looter, these actually say, you know, you pick up a land and then turn it into a real card and draw cards. So that was game 2, and you can see like how incredibly hard it was to play that game with the way that the deck was built before. It's just clunky. It doesn't have a way to push through. You have to go around. You have to go wide, and because you have to go wide and you can't go tall on your threats, the games just go too long. And that game, you know, I came down to the wire. It was way scarier than it should have been. So I'm going to go for Looter here and hope that he doesn't remove it. He does. It's very painful. Opponent uses Springleaf Drum to do it. I'm going to go ahead and just kill his Mirror Enforcer right now, so he can't be doing it with a Springleaf Drum, but he's got an ATOG, unfortunately. And now I'm in a bad spot. So I've got 3 Into the Winds and no way to convert them into cards. I don't have Looter. I don't have Draw 2, Discard 2 effect. Kind of not good for me, but I'm hoping that I can get him to try to Temur Battle Rage his ATOG. So I do find Careful Study, which lets me get a free Root Wall and a small amount of tempo with just a wind. I'm going to go ahead and fetch out my forest or my mountain as well, so if I find my grudges, I can do something with that. Alright, so here I'm just going to block and kill off one of his Flare Husks. And he's got ATOG and... uh-oh. I'm dead. So very stupid deck to have to face. Like, what a dumb way to lose, right? I'm at 19. Guess that's too low. Fling, dead. But this is exactly why Hydroblast is in the sideboard now, but it wasn't then. So pay the price for that. And then there's his last 2 games were against Zukrop. I don't know who this is. These last 2 opponents here. Oh no, so that was that opponent. And then these last 2 games here, I'm trying to get 4-1, and then we'll move over to the more current version, hopefully. All right, so again, much weaker cards in here, but you know, there was a thought process behind the cards. I'm not going to throw a Piracy Charm early, but I might find an occasion where I can use it to whittle my opponent's hand down a little bit. I'm going to play his Git Probe here into Kiln Fiend, and I make a big mistake. I play Looter, which seems like it should be good, and I don't double Piracy Charm the Kiln Fiend, and I'm about to pay for it. Shadow Rift, 7, Temur Battle Rage, 10, 20, I'm dead. What a format. Alright, so we move on to game 2. Again, no Hydroblasts. Like, The decks that do the nonsense have they Hydroblast is your friend, and boy, I just didn't get it. So at least I do get in game 2 to kill a Delver of Secrets, which is what the Piracy Charms were in here for. Again, not for the Surprise Arrogant Worm, although that is something you could have done with them if you were running them. Okay, we're going to go for the looter play. This time, hopefully, there's no creature on board to just kill me. My opponent's trying to find red, I assume. And if he doesn't kill this looter, and he does not, he has to give it Shadow Rift. He Shadow Rifts and gives it Shadow just to dig. He's doing everything he can to find red. There, he's got red, but now I've got active looter. Alright, so I'm going to pump Wild Mongrel with a Deep Analysis and then loot a Logic. I had to pump first because otherwise this was only a force spike. Now it's a counter unless he pays 2, which is what I needed it to be. Of course, that was the other thing that the Piracy Charms could be good for, is that you could just pitch them as an instant to make your opponent discard and to put an extra card in your graveyard, but not that important. The card overall is just not that good. Alright, he tries to Flame Slash on my Mongrel. I decided I'm going to loot for cards rather than trying to go crazy protecting it. He didn't kill Looter, which is the more important card. I guess he doesn't see it that way. I'm going to go ahead and Piracy Charm him just because he's a little bit low on cards, and because he's a combo deck, and I want to keep him off of. I don't want him to get enough cards in hand to actually pull his combo off, and I'm hoping that will improve my chances here, because I intended to take some damage. Unfortunately, because I tapped out, he's gonna hit me pretty hard there. I can't even loot the Root Walls into play for value because they would die to the Electrickery. And now the situation's a little bit precarious. It's not looking too great, but my opponent seems to have, well, he's got Nivik Cyclops, so getting a little scary now. I'm going to go ahead and thin the deck, finding not much. I'm going to send him with the Wild Mongrel, who of course, when my opponent decides not to block, I'm going to actually pump for damage here. I need this game to end as quickly as I can, but I'm not going to get I don't want to pump too much because I want to hold back in case of exactly this. So my opponent has a Bolt for a Mongrel, and I decide not to pump it. And the reason I don't do that is because I have a lethal attack right here. So my opponent's forced to chump block, and this is where pressure allows you to convert, like change the game. Pressure turns creatures into removal, and this is exactly what I figured out too late for this tournament, but eventually. And as you can see, that was a little too much pressure there for my opponent to deal with, and he loses. Again, Werebear looks really good right now, but it's not as good as it looks, because it has a big problem with Graveyard Hate, which is all over the place. Alright, so, and they bring in Hate because of the Circular Logics, and you just have to play around it. Alright, so my opponent does have an answer to the turn 2 Looter. I have another Looter, and we're going to see if he can kill that, because if he can't, as you know, I'm going to win. He does flip it though with a Gush, and Flame Slashes my Looter. Alright, so now I don't have the ability to I cannot Piracy Charm Insectile Aberration. This is the other problem with the card. It's not looking as good here, but I can at least Into the Wind it. So I'm going to do that. It's kind of sucks that I did that. My opponent actually has a response, the Apostle Blessing, so I'm going to try to Circular Logic his Blessing. And I believe he has another response, but these are costing him some life. Like, there's 4 life that my opponent just lost. Okay, well, can't stop that, but I can press and try to race, so let's do that. This was another tip-off to me about the direction the deck should go, because as you can see, the solution to a threat is actually not always an answer. Sometimes it's a bigger threat, provided you have the life to support that. So my opponent's down to 2 cards in hand, which is excellent. I can Piracy Charm away 50% of my opponent's hand if I want to, which is kind of nice. But I'm also holding it because the other thing that Piracy Charm is, it can give a creature +2/-1, and it can give a creature Island Walk, and that may be relevant at some point. Opponent goes for a Gush there, get probes my hand. He can't play at least another he can't play another flyer and block, which is important. My opponent's seen my hand though, so he knows that I have lethal here if he were to not block, so he is going to block. I'm going to go ahead and cycle first so that I can thin the deck before I discard the Wild Mongrel. Go ahead and pump him twice. Opponent's at 3. I go ahead and decide to take a card out of his hand, only because I didn't have enough cards to... I was concerned that my opponent might have enough cards to combo me out, and as it turns out, that Gitaxian Probe I took out of his hand saved me right there because my opponent is damage shy. He must have top decked the Lightning Bolt is the only thing I can think. So when I Piracy Charm the Git Probe before he drew, he decided that was his worst card and then drew the Bolt and probably was kicking himself because he was able to take me to 1 and then lose. So I guess Charm worked out there, but yeah, not great overall. The other thing about the Charm that I should have done is I should have played it in response to my opponent's Gush, which would have made it a lot stronger. I think I make another misplay regarding Gush actually here. Gush is also a card that this deck could use and has used in the past as well. Works very, very well in this deck, but it's more for longer, grindier games, and I don't think that it's necessarily great. I have what amounts to a terrible draw against Affinity. Turn 2 pumped up. I drew a card off the Root Wallow, which is why I kept it, but see, look at this Piracy Charm garbage. If only that were Rancor right here. I could have gone Forest, Rancor, attack you for 5, and then I've got something. But now, don't really have something. Alright, see it bounce. I'm just stalling. Pump. I'm trying to tempo my opponent because I don't really have... He has like a clunky draw over there where he's missing some mana, and I just don't have a lot going on. Always be careful when you always be careful when you study. Always be careful when you careful study, if you can, in order to make sure that you'll be able to cast an Arrogant Worm if you draw it. I'm going to take a card out of my opponent's hand. I get a Carapace Forger, and I believe that's going to be absolutely important later on in the game. So I'm going to go for Deep Analysis here. Opponent has a counter for that, so I send in for the Arrogant Worm. My opponent's playing True Affinity, not the ATOG combo, and play Wild Mongrel and pass, but I have 3 cards in hand. Oh, I guess I was wrong. He's playing the ATOG combo in response. Deep Analysis. I'm at 17. Deep Analysis was just enough. And, well, you know how this goes. I get flung out of the game. So we move on to game 2. Very, very stupid. Do not like that deck at all. Alright, but got a great draw here. Careful Study, just so good. And I decide I'm going to throw a Deep Analysis and a Grudge because I want to Grudge early, but at the same time I really want to get some extra cards in my hand. I'm going to play what amounts to a Sinkhole before I draw, and it turns out to be really good. So I draw 2 cards and miss a land, but it allows me to just discard a Grudge, and then I miss another land, which allows me to discard Deep. I Deep, finding a Mountain, and then discard double Basking Root Wallow. Like, oh no, I'm discarding the hand size. Alright, because my opponent's playing, I get a Hardcast Grudge now. This gets really bad for my opponent. Because my opponent is playing Springleaf Drum, I actually trade a Root Wallow, who was free anyway, for his creature. Even though I can't pump my Root Wallow, he thought I wouldn't do it. I was more than happy to do that. And look at that, Springleaf Drum, and no creature in play to use it, so the mana denial is really good. And now I've got Active Looter, and this game's over. Throw away a Forest there. Careful Study into Arrogant Worm. Main phase, pick up an island. I'm going to loot away a Circular Logic. I threw away a Wild Mongrel there because I've got Active Looter. I don't need it. And I'm going to just keep playing Arrogant Worms till my opponent loses, which is now. So the sideboard tech doing awesome stuff. We move into game 3. But just a little less consistent than the version I have now, because this version of the sideboard did not actually have Traveler's Amulet, so it would hit its mountain just a little less often. However, look at this. Opening hand, Ash Baron's Ancient Grudge. Thank you, keep flying. Alright, end of turn, we're going to cycle Ash Barons. Now these Werebears would actually be... oh, so I don't Grudge there because I didn't want Relic to nail me. These Werebears would actually have been not as good. They would have been God, if I could finish my thought. Elephant Guides, which means I wouldn't be attacking for 1 here, but you can see how crappy that Werebear is against that Relic of Progenitus. Now, he can't Relic, there's no window of opportunity where he can stop an Ancient Grudge as long as I play it and replay it without passing priority. I play it, he can respond to it, but it's not in the graveyard. Then when it hits the graveyard, I replay it. I haven't passed priority, and he can't Relic it away, although if he tried to, I'd play it in response. And you can see what's happening is that because of the fact that I drew the mountain, I'm able to just crush my opponent's mana base here. I'm taking a lot of damage to do it, but I'm setting myself up for the situation where now I get to get my defenses down. I go ahead and do it main phase because of the fact that I have so I go ahead and do it main phase because I don't want to fight with him. I know he has counterspells in his deck, and I decide that the thing to do here is going to actually be to just get to dump my hand on the board, not worry about a counter for now, and then we'll deal with it later. Now the counter is very, very weak because he can sack Relic of Progenitus to give me no cards in the graveyard, which would make my counter do nothing. Man, that Werebear has been okay, but I sure wish it was a enchantment right now. Anyway, so as I was saying, if I try to Circular Logic and he exiles my graveyard, what I would have to do then is I would have to discard more cards to Wild Mongrel with the Logic on the stack, or else the Logic would do nothing. Alright, so my opponent's playing, you know, just a bunch of 4/4s, and I'm going to let him have most of that, but I want to keep him off his card drawing, so I end up putting 1 card in my graveyard, 2 cards in my graveyard via cycling, and then I can actually Logic the Wellspring for 2. Because he has a Springleaf Drum, I couldn't just do it for 1 effectively. One of those cards pumped the Mongrel. Of course, I pumped the Mongrel a second time here and trade with his 4/4. And then I can just trade a land away and kill a Carapace Dork. Except he's got a Galvanic Blast, so I have to trade another land in to counterspell his Galvanic Blast. It does mean that my, well, not counterspell, but delay it. So it does mean that my Mongrel dies there, but mostly okay. And as you can see, my opponent's wiped my graveyard, and I already have Threshold again. Or I can at any moment. But if I don't need to, I'm going to... So I discard here just to win, specifically because it gives me Threshold and allows me to tempo my opponent with a big attack over the casting the other Root Walla. Alright, so my opponent's trying to deal with Wild Mongrel here. I'm of course going to trade more cards for a Mirror Enforcer. And you can keep your 2/2. We're going to pump, and hit for just a truckload of damage. Opponent's at 5. He's trying to do something. Yep, you get a Prism. Frogmite, sure. Carapace Forger, you're out of mana, so I don't think so. Gonna play Circular Logic, finding another Circular Logic. No Wild Mongrel to play it if he had another play off his Springleaf Drum, but still, like my chances there. Anyway, that game is over. And so that was a 4-1 tournament with the older version of the deck. And then I had a couple of frustrating games, and I realized like that these were 2 games where I lost to combo again and again, and I said that is it. I'm going to get some Hydroblasts, and I did. And I put the deck together, and then I played the following games with the improved build. So hopefully you're enjoying yourself. And here we go. Yeah, this is just much better. I don't know if this first version had the Elephant Guides. No, it had counterspells instead of Elephant Guides. I thought maybe Rankers would be enough, but then I decided I was going to go whole hog. I swapped out the counters for I had no bounce spells in here as well, so I can't remember what the other card was. If it comes up, I'll let you know. But I swapped out the counters. I've just got an exclude here, so I made a big boo-boo there. Playing that Mongrel, I should have just passed. Oh well. Into turn, I'm going to loot. My opponent's got removal for that. This is getting very bad, actually. Sure, I can play a free Root Walla, but my hand just got a lot worse. Alright, well, I can try a Rancor. If he has Electrolyze, he can't kill it, and look, I didn't play a land first. Yeah, I screwed this game up pretty bad. If I had played my untapped Forest, I could have Circular Logic that. My opponent's now going to start drawing extra cards, so I thought maybe my opponent was a a combo deck, and he still might be, but it starts feeling like he's playing a control deck here. That's what I realized far too late. I've misplayed this game badly because I'm thinking he's combo. Oh yeah, that's what it was. I was trying Chatter the Squirrel. So this is just a card that you want to throw away to an early loot effect, but also it's a card that insulates you against edicts. And so at first I thought that made sense, but then what I realized was that if you can stick, it's hard to do, but if you can stick an Elephant Guide, then you're insulated fairly well against edicts as well. And so, but in the games where your opponents don't have edicts, the Chatter of the Squirrel is just a crappy Chatter of the Squirrel, whereas Elephant Guide is like game over in a lot of cases. Like right here, Elephant Guide, Arrogant Worm, Smash for 7 is just game over, right? Well, actually, I'd be attacking for 9 points of trample. It'd be just crushing. Or I could put it on the Mongrel, for example. But I don't have it, so we're gonna end up fighting. I'm gonna fight counter spells that don't work. So if that had been the bounce spell, I could have Circular Logicked his removal, and when that failed, I could have discarded Into the Wind and picked up my Arrogant Worm, and then flashed it back with Mongrel, or just put the Rancor on the Mongrel. Here you can see how just absolutely garbage, and I'm about to pay a big price here. I'm thinking I'm trying to run him out of cards because all of his cards are very strong, and I just lose to Electrickery and die. Chatter of the Scroll, complete crap. Interesting if you just know that you're going to face tons and tons of edicts, Innocent Bloods, and stuff like that, but otherwise pretty much a garbage card that doesn't belong at all. Also, at this time I had 22 lands. I was main decking both the mountain and the plains because I hadn't thought about Traveler's Amulet yet, and I didn't have as much space in the sideboard because of the way that the deck was constructed as for that extra card, and I do now. Hydroblasts in the main at least, so we've got a good shot here, and my opponent, of course, Wild Mongrel gives the red deck fits, so my opponent's playing AK, and I realize he's just a super big control deck. And look what I'm going to do. This is a beautiful thing. I want to pause it. Okay, this is the most wonderful, this game ends right here. So my opponent plays Flame Slash. So in response, I play Arrogant Worm. My opponent prepares to counterspell it, realizes he has to wait for the Madness trigger, which tells me something. Not a big deal though. I'm going to play the Arrogant Worm anyway. So I run out the Arrogant Worm. My opponent does indeed have the counterspell, which allows me to pump Wild Mongrel with Circular Logic. And this is all because of the Ash Barrens. You notice that this is a force spike for 1. I would have to throw away one of these cards to the graveyard if not for that Ash Barrens. This is so important that that card is in this deck. And so I logic his counterspell, so force spike it, pumping Wild Mongrel, which allows Arrogant Worm to live. I have also pumped Wild Mongrel with that, and then I Basking Root Walla, bump it again, and counterspell the Flame Slash with the Basking Root Walla who comes into play. Boom. What an insane turn. That was so much tempo, and now I get to untap and just crush, right? So I'm actually going to pump here because it's such a tremendous clock. My opponent's down to 9, and I've got lethal next turn, and I figure whatever card he can do to deal with what's on the board, it's going to have to be red almost certainly. So I'm going to bring out even more pressure here. If he's got Electrickery, I can counter it, so I'm not concerned about that. And smash. Alright, now I'm just going to pump Mongrel. I'm not going to spend any mana here, and what is he going to do? Lose. Alright, so game 2. That was such an amazing, like the tempo on that was so like absolutely delightful. Anyway, so here's a awkward keep, but this is of course the problem with having the mountain and the plains in the deck. Although they were 21 and 22nd land, whereas the current version only has 20. So I suppose this might have been a mulligan without that, but then again, I don't know. It's hard to say. So anyway, I do have an early Mongrel here, which is pretty doggone good against red, I've heard. This doesn't work out quite as well as I'd like, but it's more important for me to get blue mana out than anything. Opponent tries to remove it in response. I go for a Basking Root Walla to pump my dog. and then he counterspells the Root Walla, which is amazing. I'm going to go ahead and pump it again, though, with Deep Analysis and counter the Bolt. And because he did this pre-combat, this is the other thing that's nasty. All those pumps rip a huge chunk off my opponent's life total. Alright, Mash. I've got Arrogant Worm, so I as much as I'd like to get a land drop here, I'd much rather just Arrogant Worm and pump in response to Electrostatic Bolt and keep my guy alive. My opponent's back is getting broken by trying to Lightning Bolt Wild Mongrels. It's just something of a, it's a little bit of a fool's journey. He finally gives up and Flame Slashes the 4/4 instead, which makes a lot of sense. Plays pieces of the puzzle, getting, I don't know, some cards. What does he get? Dispel and Preordain? No, Dispel. Deep Analysis, I think, were the two cards. Anyway, doesn't matter though. I'm going in. My opponent's at 10. I flashback Deep Analysis, don't play anything, and just pump to 10 and still have a card left over. So that's the other thing that you can see now, like how the Rancor completely changed that game, because Rancor caused him to play removal into a Mongrel that I could pump, which was extremely important because it allowed me to get tons of extra damage in, and then the extra hits shaved so much off of his life total that I'm able to quickly just flashback Deep Analysis, dump my hand, and kill him. Totally changes the way that the game plays out, as you can see. And then I've got a couple more practice games and we're all done. This guy, I don't know why it's 1-0. I don't know why we only played one. Maybe he didn't want to play against me or something. This, as you can see, actually has the final build. So I'm in a careful study finding double Root Walla. How gross is that first turn? My God, that's fun. Okay. Opponent cycles the land. Not quite the same as a careful study, draw 2, play 2. I do have a little bit of a slowdown here. I'm not going to be able to play turn 2 Looter or Mongrel, but I do at least get to play a pickup land, so it's kind of like I drew an extra card off of the Simic in terms of how that all works. So opponent has a Curse of the Pierced Heart, which indicates he's playing like just aggro, and because he's playing probably Lightning Bolt deck. Basically, he's just going to go face, face, face over and over. I'm going to actually, he's low on cards though, so I'm actually going to Circular Logic his Needle Drop to prevent 1 damage to myself, but also keep him off a card, because every card he draws could be 3 damage, and so that actually probably prevented 4 damage is what it amounts to. Opponent floats some Rift Bolts, but that gives me a perfect window to Elephant Guide my Mongrel, although I could, Mongrel's a pretty safe card to put Elephant Guide on anyway. So I'm going to eat some damage off Bolts, and I'm taking damage off Curse of the Pierced Heart. But my opponent is actually losing the race, and he draws and concedes. I'm going to take 1. If he has Fire Blast and a card that deals 3 plus his Pierced Heart, he could do 8 to me. But then he's dead next turn. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, draw cards, 13, right? And I could, of course, pump these, 14, 15 points of damage. It's way, way, way too much damage for my opponent to deal with. And for some reason, he doesn't play me 2 games, so I move on to the next opponent. And if you thought that was fun. Alright, so double Ash Barrens is certainly keepable. I have Careful Study there also, and I rip a Forest, which is fantastic. I might have wanted to go first turn Root Walla, but not with Careful Study. Opponent plays Spore Frog. I have no idea what he's actually doing over there, so I'm just going to hope I don't get comboed out. It indicates to me some kind of combo deck. I get Mongrel down because it's more tempo than playing Careful Study double Root Walla. I can do that in a moment, and if I have to protect the Mongrel, I can against like a Doomblade or a Disfigure. Alright, so he's building up some kind of graveyard, and I figure with 1 black, what can he do? So I'm going to go Guide Smash, and he fogs it. So now I've got good pressure on my opponent. If he edicts me, I can throw a Root Walla down and sack it and keep the Mongrel, or worst case, I be just Doomblades or something. Then I mean, not Doomblades, but if he kills the Mongrel, then of course I get the Elephant. Alright, so now we're going to get the card advantage, Careful Study. Fantastic. Still haven't found an actual land since the ones that I started with. Well, I drew the 1, but I haven't found one in a few turns. It's a little bit slow, but I've got my opponent under tremendous pressure here. And if I untap, I'll probably be sitting on Circular Logic, feeling pretty safe about it. Opponent's not doing much of consequence, so I pitch a deep analysis. You know what happens here, right? Deep, play a land, smash, pump. Does the pump resolve? No disfigure? It resolves. Guess what? Die. Just die. I'll make them black each, so he can't. I don't know if there's anything that interacts with non-black creatures, but I might as well go ahead. Now, one thing I will recommend is that you don't change the color of your mongrels against somebody except when it matters. So like if they have Apostle's Blessing or Doomblade, like the other guy who didn't realize that Doomblade, you cannot kill a mongrel with it, what you want to do is you want to keep changing your mongrel's color to green so that you never reveal to them that the mongrel can change colors, because people forget, like the Doomblade guy did, and then at some point you can actually get value out of it. But here I couldn't remember if there was a card that kills like non-black creatures here, and the nice thing is the only card I can think of that he might have would be like yeah, I don't know. So I played him. I made him black just to be on the safe side, but as you can see, it was fine. I even had a card left over. The interaction between Deep Analysis and Wild Mongrel is just crazy, especially with this extra speed from the Elephant Guide. And we get game 2, and this game is even more absurd, I think. All right, so not a great hand, and I screwed up here. I should have gone first turn Rootwalla, second turn Rancor on the Rootwalla, pick up my card, right? But my opponent plays a Perilous Mirror, and because I want to protect Merfolk Looter, I end up playing Rancor on the Rootwalla here, so I'm back a turn basically, and then I play my Merfolk Looter. He has a Golgari Brown Scales. He's playing some kind of dredge deck. I just don't know exactly what it is or does. I haven't actually seen this deck before, but as for me, I'm going to careful study out a Worm and throw away a Deep Analysis as well. I've got Looter up with Deep Analysis ready to go. I also have Just the Wind in case there's something crazy going on over there that I don't know, like a big old delve creature or something. All right, so end of turn I'm going to loot, throw away Deep. My turn, flashback Deep, play Rancor on Arrogant Worm, and smash in. And when my opponent double blocks, I'll get even more card advantage, looting away a Boomerang, which draws me a card, bounces a creature, which allows me to kill a creature. It turns out I kill Spore Frog because he didn't want me to kill his guy and trample over him for 3. He wanted to protect it over the frog, so that's fine. On my turn, I'm in a careful study, and Elephant Guide Rancor my Arrogant Worm, pick up a card and smash for 11 points of trample. Opponent takes a ton. He takes 8. He does have some pressure on me though, and he has Spore Frog to stall. His horror there can grow pretty good, so I've got to watch that. And my hand is actually out of gas, but I find myself a loot into Just the Wind, and now I'm feeling great. I'm going to send in for 11. I'm assuming Spore Frog goes off here, yeah. And what I can do now is I can play an instant speed Arrogant Worm and play a Just the Wind, even though I just took 3 damage flashing back my draw 2. Opponent plays Golgari Brown Scale. As I said before, I've never lost a game where Merfolk Looter stays active. Like, it just doesn't happen. And as you can see, my opponent realizes the handwriting's on the wall. So the Arrogant Worm is going to come down, trade off with his 4/4. I'll go ahead and take 1. If he has removal for Arrogant Worm, I'll just make him pick up his 4/4 instead with the mana that I have left over. And basically, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? The green enchantments are just so ridiculous. The fact that this deck generates a ton of tempo and card advantage while also putting incredible pressure on your opponent is just, well, it's pretty delightful. So I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I've enjoyed playing it. I think this is a really tight deck. It's a lot of fun to play. I haven't seen anyone else play it, and hopefully I provided you with some interesting material. You can look forward to many more. I expect to be playing in the leagues again, and we'll have tight games, I assume, with hopefully getting some tickets, because I am broke as a joke. And I've put everything into this deck, basically. So that's all I've got, though. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed yourself. As I said, I'll see you next time. And let me know in the comments if you like the Pauper content. I know that some other folks want the multiplayer Commander. I will try to mix it up. I don't want to lose the people that came here for Commander, but the 1v1 Commander is just atrocious. So I'll talk about that during the multiplayer though. And probably what you'll see is more. It'll be like 2 or 3 to 1 when it comes to videos. You know, a couple of Paupers and then a Commander here and there. So stay tuned for that as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.